What I'm going to share with you today is going to fundamentally transform how you experience interactions around you, whether it be one on one interactions, group interactions, personally or professionally. And the reason this is so important is because having the understanding of what I'm going to share with you is going to change how you show up in every single interaction you experience in your own world. Now, what is this concept that I speak of that is going to be so powerful that's going to change every interaction that you have? That may sound like an overstatement, but it does come down to one thing and one perspective that made a big difference for me in all the interactions that I was having. And that is to realize that most people's responses are automatic. They are coming from a place that has not necessarily gone through the process of thinking through what they're going to say before they say it. Now, if you think about different situations that you've been in, if you've been in conversations where you say something and suddenly someone gets upset with you, or you're in a meeting and you present an idea and you're told that that's ridiculous. Why would you even think that? Notice in people if there's a pause between what you say and what they respond with in response to what you said. A lot of times, there's no pause there. So, what exactly is happening? And this is really important to understand. Three things are key here. Number one, the brain is wired for survival and protection. How does that apply here? Well, if you say something to somebody and they didn't like it, they're going to feel threatened in some way. What does their brain do? Their brain receives that as a threat and they respond automatically because that's what we're supposed to do. If we were in the forest and we were being chased by a predator, the brain is automatically going to heighten our senses, get our heart rate going, mobilize us for movement so we can run. In an emotional situation where there's no physical threat, the same thing's happening. It's just the expression of that movement gets to be an emotional expression. It's words, it's heightened response, it's a raised voice, it's whatever that looks like. That's the response to threat that's being perceived in that moment, even though there's no physical threat there. So if you look at those interactions and think about those moments where suddenly someone came at you, does that really explain why that wasn't necessarily about you? Does that make that interaction feel any better when you reflect on it? What becomes important in those moments is for you to be able to stay back and sit in a moment of calm to allow that interaction to happen. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that the automatic nature of those responses makes it appropriate or right in any way, shape, or form. In some instances, you may need to be automatic. You see your child touch the stove. Stop. You need to stop. That's an automatic response that may sound a little bit louder with a raised voice. In that instance, it's appropriate. But if you just generally say a comment and somebody starts yelling at you and saying, "You're so stupid. That's ridiculous. Why would you say that? That doesn't even make any sense." The automatic response in that form is not acceptable. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is if you think back on those instances, there is an automatic nature to that response, which we need to be aware of in order for us to then be able to say, okay, how do we want to handle this situation? And how does this situation get managed appropriately? Which brings me to point number two, that our automatic responses can be regulated. And that regulation is the absolute key to creating environments that are reliably respectful. The reliability comes from point number three, which I'll get to in a minute. But the idea of being able to regulate your responses is so important in any interaction, personal, professional, high stakes, day-to-day stuff. That's important for a couple of reasons. It allows you to actually be able to take a step back to think about the situation before you respond. So that instead of a perceived threat or a heightened emotion or whatever that is being detected by the brain and it automatically rerouting messages and sending messages to that survival center of our brain, which is now going to make us respond in ways to protect us. We want to allow a moment for there to be space so we can then tap into those parts of our brain that are responsible for thinking, for reasoning. Hmm, does this make sense? Maybe the person has something going on with them that is making them respond in this way. to take a pause, to allow for space for empathy if it's appropriate, to say that person's not yelling at me, they're just frustrated at something. There's something going on there. What can I do and how can I respond to help them so that I can understand where they're coming from, support them if that's required, and then return to some sort of dialogue that's more balanced and grounded. So that idea of being able to regulate becomes important. Well, how do you do that? How do you do that? That comes to the third point, where being able to regulate and being able to reliably regulate and therefore reliably create an environment of respect where people are being seen, valued, heard, appreciated, that takes practice. We are automatically wired to go from threat to response for survival. We need to reroute that wiring or create another path for when there's no true physical threat or no true threat to our life, so that we are going from, okay, we're sensing something, something's off. Let's go to the thinking center of our brain. Let's go to the logic center of our brain instead of to the survival center of our brain. That takes practice. The way to do it is a method that I created, which it has been extremely successful for people in heightened moments, and that is my 3 R's. To take a moment to reflect, reframe, and respond. So what does that mean? Taking a moment first removes you from a situation. It takes just a second, whether it be through a deep breath or just an awareness of being grounded. Think about your feet in that moment as an example. That takes you out of that emotional interaction that's happening into something that's either removed through the breath because you're allowing a moment to then access the higher centers of your brain that are going to help you think through that moment. The grounding piece, thinking about your feet, again, it takes you away from the emotional part of your brain into something that's concrete, again, engaging the logic center of your brain. By reflecting on it and in that moment, recognizing what's happening and even applying a name to that feeling, again, it takes you away from the emotional center to the logic center of your brain. So then what does that do? That is creating a pathway into that direction. So if we were to look at the brain and consider it in 3 regions, you've got your lower brain, which is going to create your physical responses to protect yourself. You've got your midbrain, which is receiving the emotions and deciding, is there threat here? Is there not threat here? It's then accessing some memories from the mid to higher brain or the upper brain, which is your logic center, looking at memories and saying, this feeling I have, if I look back on my memories, is that a threat or is that safe? So by being able to take a moment and recognize what you're feeling and to process the fact that this is actually a safe environment, you create a path that takes you from your threat detection center to a logic-based center again and again and again every time you do that. And when you're up there in that upper brain where the logic centers are working, by reframing it, which is the second step, which is the R, reflect, reframe, you're actually anchoring yourself in that logic-centered brain, which is further away from your emotional centers. And then you can say and realize that, okay, there's more going on here. There's something happening with this person, or this person's bringing up a valid point. They may not be doing it in the most productive way because they're yelling at me, but there's something there that needs to be looked at. So that instead of receiving that moment as a personal attack, because it may feel that way if someone's yelling at you, you can then take that and say, there's something here that I need to explore. What can I pull out of it? Now, in your response, that also is very important. That's the third R. How are you going to respond? You want to respond in a very regulated way, because if you add to that emotion that the other person's emitting, it's just going to increase their response. They're going to feel more threatened, and it's going to trigger that wiring path again and again, which is going to reinforce that pattern and not bring you to some situation where you can resolve this constructively. At the same time, you've taken a moment, you're reflecting, you realize, okay, this isn't about me. This person cares deeply about something or is just triggered in some way. I need to figure out what that is. There are multiple ways of addressing this. How do I want to do that? I don't want to escalate because you're in your thinking center. How do I bring this back? And one of the most powerful ways of bringing it back is to mention the person's name to get them to stop. Everybody loves hearing their name. It is something they resonate with. It brings them to attention. It piques something in them that oftentimes just makes the person stop. So if they're yelling at you and you want to stop in that moment and you're able to keep yourself calm, you can say, Jerry, if the person's name is Jerry, Jerry, you're talking at me in a way that we're not able to have a productive conversation. Let's just stop for a moment. So you're maintaining your cool. You've taken a moment to reflect. What am I feeling? I'm feeling agitated. Okay, wait a second. Let's reframe it. This isn't about me. This is about the other person. Now let's respond in a way that brings it back. You mention their name. You call out the behavior very nicely because you're recognizing this is an automatic response. This isn't about me. So you're not taking it personally. And then you can bring it back and have a conversation. And majority of the time, the person will stop. And when you call them out on it, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that. Let's talk. So the base point here is by recognizing that our responses are often, if not most often, automatic. You can then take a step back and say, okay, this is not a really healthy situation. How can I bring it back so that it is a healthier situation and it is a more respectful dialogue? And as you do that more, that helps you build your wiring and your pathways and your neurology and behavior in a way that's driving you more towards the higher centers of your brain, that upper brain region, so that you're being pulled to the lower center and that survival response only when it's needed. Because over time, as you've thought through things, you develop this self-awareness, which we'll talk about in other videos. But you'll learn to recognize that, oh, this feeling is feeling like a trigger that is a true safety issue versus a trigger that, okay, this is an emotional response that's related to a memory that I've had in the past. So that becomes really important. By your having that ability to do that, you then increase the other person's awareness by calling them out on the behavior, which then they will hopefully work on themselves and develop those pathways in terms of, okay, I'm feeling this way. I don't need to yell at the person to make them hear me. I can actually have a dialogue as well. And oh, wow, we had a good conversation when I was calm. That will help them construct their wiring as well. So, this insight of automatic responses, recognizing that we can regulate our response, and also recognizing that this is a learned thing, that we, through practice, can rewire the way that we respond in these situations. All of that helps actually breed empathy. It creates a space for empathy because we've all been triggered and we've all had experiences that have impacted us. And so by taking a step back and allowing for this, the 3 Rs to process, and then by bringing the other person back and helping and supporting them to do that, we can actually start to create environments where we can learn to communicate with one another effectively, where we don't feel the need to yell at each other. Because we know that in a calm, cool, collected manner, we can express our points, be seen, be heard, feel that our perspectives are valuable, and offer something unique, even if it's something different we don't agree with, that we can have a dialogue so that we know that our presence and contribution does matter. And if it's way off, okay, well, there are ways to redirect that as well, which again, we'll talk about in other videos. But the core concept here that will fundamentally change your interactions if you look at it this way, which I highly recommend because it's changed many interactions for me and helped people around me and the people I've worked with and mentored change their interactions, is by recognizing that our reactions are automatic, they can be regulated, and the regulation can be learned and permeate to other people, create a ripple effect that really creates a culture of respect. So, if you have any comments on that, please do leave them in the comments. If you have other ideas for topics you'd like me to address, let me know. I'm looking forward to bringing more valuable content to you. And if again, please subscribe, like, thumbs up, share this content with other people you feel may find it valuable. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks.